In the early hours of the morning of May 11, 1995, police in Calvi, Corsica, received a disturbing call. Two tourists were driving along one of the island's mountain roads when a woman informed them that her husband was driving his car over a cliff, and that the car had fallen off the cliff and crashed onto the cliff. The beach is below and she threw herself away from the car before it fell. Police and rescue workers arrived at the scene and found the woman, who identified herself as 25-year-old Aurora Martin, from Belgium, and told police she was on her honeymoon with her husband, 36-year-old Mark van Beers. They were on a scenic flight. Picturesque late at night when the accident happened. Aurora was taken to hospital for shock and treatment for minor injuries, and her husband's body was recovered the next morning. It was an unspeakable tragedy that Mark van Beers' family struggled to come to terms with. However, Aurora did not support her husband's family and abandoned them a few days after Mark's death. Mark's family did not believe what happened that night, and some doubts about the accident caused the family to ask the police questions whose answers were known years after the accident, and to find out the details of that fateful night, let us go back in time to the year before the accident. Mark van Beers was a Belgian businessman living in Brussels, Belgium. He worked as a chartered accountant and achieved success as a tax consultant in a financial services company. Mark worked hard to develop his career, and he did not have much time for social life outside his circle of family and close friends. He was an introverted person. But as he approached his 40s, he felt ready to enter into a serious relationship and start a family. So he used dating sites, through which he met Aurora, his future wife. He was honest and frank about what he was looking for. He was ready to settle down and start a family, and Aurora was equally frank with him. Mark's family was skeptical about the relationship at first, but Mark was very happy with his relationship with Aurora. Everything seemed perfect, and after only 6 months they were married in Brussels on March 11, 1995. All of Mark's large family were there, but on Aurora's side, by inviting her sister only. The newlyweds waited for 2 months before going on their honeymoon. They chose the French island of Corsica, an island in the Mediterranean Sea famous for its rugged landscape and azure waters. In the first week of May, they checked into a hotel in Calvi to spend a romantic week. The week had been relaxing and exciting. They wandered the cobblestone streets and enjoyed sumptuous dinners overlooking the harbor, dreaming of their future together, but things were about to change. On the night of May 10, the newlyweds took a romantic drive in their rented car up the mountain to Notre Dame de la Serra, but poor Mark never came back. Let's go back to the day of the incident. When the police arrived at the scene, Aurora was in a state of panic and crying intensely. She told the police that they had gone out for a late dinner and then decided to drive to a scenic spot at the top of a cliff, where lovers often go. Returning, they took the wrong road, and when her husband realized this, he started the car, but he misjudged the distance to the edge of the cliff, and the car went down the hill, and Aurora was able to miraculously escape at the last minute, but Mark was not so lucky. During interrogation, they asked her to talk to them about what happened again. This time Aurora gave a different statement. She said that an animal had appeared on the road and Mark swerved to avoid hitting it. Mark was in the car when it went over the edge, but she managed to get out. According to Aurora, she immediately descended 140 meters from the cliff face to search for her husband. He was inside the car but did not respond, and that is when she decided to drag him to the edge of the water as far away from the car as possible, in case the fuel leak caused an explosion. Mark did not respond to Aurora's attempts to regain consciousness, so she got onto the road to go to seek help. The researchers were puzzled by her story. When they first arrived, they tried to descend the cliff to the beach, but that was impossible without the proper equipment. So the Auror's claim that she descended without assistance in the dark was immediately called into question. They also pointed out that she was not wearing any shoes and that her feet were not harmed. Climbing over the rugged terrain would result in many deep cuts and fractures, without a doubt. She was taken by ambulance to receive treatment for shock and other minor injuries, and rescuers, using climbing equipment, made their way to where Mark's rented car was lying upside down. When they arrived at the scene, there was no sign of Mark in the driver's seat. There was a copious amount of blood and brain tissue. They followed a trail of blood drops to the water's edge, but he was not there. Police divers waited until dawn before they went to sea. 5 hours later, they recovered Mark's badly injured body from 3 meters deep in the water, about 50 meters from where the car crashed. Most of his injuries were to his head. In fact, his face was unrecognizable. Corsican authorities ruled Mark's tragic death an accident and prepared his remains to be returned to Belgium. Mark's family began making funeral arrangements with Aurora's help. To their surprise, she insisted that Mark's body should be cremated as quickly as possible. She told his family that she and Mark had discussed death on their honeymoon, and he told her he would prefer cremation. However, his family intervened and Mark did not mention to any of them his desire to be cremated after his death. In Belgium, one has to submit an official declaration to your local council if you want your body to be cremated after your death, and Mark did not do this. So Aurora's request was denied, and Mark was buried. Mark's family struggled to come to terms with Mark's unexpected death and did not quite believe Aurora's story about what had happened, refusing to accept it and asking the police to reinvestigate the matter. However, without any concrete evidence, the Belgian authorities have already ruled that the accident was an accident. The Van Beers tried to take care of Aurora in the wake of Mark's death, but after the dispute over his cremation, she did not want to have anything to do with them, as they were searching for answers about his death with her being the only witness, as any information she could provide would be helpful. But there was a reason Aurora was avoiding her in-laws. Without notifying them, she sold Mark's house for €125,000. She also wasted no time collecting the life insurance money she was owed after her husband's tragic death. However, Aurora did not invest the money, nor did she use it merely to make ends meet. On the contrary, the first thing I did was to have a rhinoplasty. Finally, after great pressure from the Van Beers family, the Belgian authorities agreed to investigate, and opened an official investigation 1 year after Mark's death. The police visited Aurora at her new home to question her, and during the interview, Aurora told them all about Mark's last night. They had a late dinner in Calvi, then drove to the top of the hill. The Belgian police told the second version of their story that an animal crossed the road and Mark swerved to avoid hitting it. Although Aurora's story seemed believable and she appeared to be a grieving widow, investigators had a feeling that she knew more than she was telling. Fortunately, her wish to have Mark cremated did not come true, so the police were able to exhume his body. Because the body had traveled from one country to another, his coffin was lined with metal. For this reason, his body was preserved in good condition, and the forensic pathologist was able to collect many pieces of evidence. The autopsy revealed something that would change the course of the investigation forever. Mark had suffered a severe injury to his skull, caused by a sharp object, such as a hammer or a baseball bat, and there was more. Mark's stomach was empty, disproving Aurora's statement that they had eaten a late dinner. In the hours before the accident. Why did you lie? A Belgian car accident specialist was sent to Corsica to further investigate the accident. The car was recovered, and they also re-investigated witnesses who arrived at the scene. What the accident specialist found was that the accident had occurred on the only stretch of road that did not have a firewall. He wondered why Mark was directing the steering wheel towards the abyss and not the other way around. Aurora Martin's version of events did not match the evidence. If Mark's car had swerved as she told police, the car would have landed in the water directly in front of her, rather than at the bottom of the cliff at an approximately 90-degree angle to the right. Also, eyewitnesses confirmed that there were no skid marks on the runway or the road. When an accident occurs in which an animal is walking on the road, the expected reaction is to press the brakes and turn slightly, but this was not the case at the accident scene in Corsica. There is another issue of interest to investigators. The out-of-control car had set a course down the hill, but the bushes and plants on the cliff were unaffected, indicating that the car had been stationary before it fell. The experts' report concluded that the car slid off the road. They also proved that it was not possible for the passenger to open the car's door and throw himself while it was moving. That night the rescuers told investigators about something that was suspicious to them. The story of his wife pulling Mark's body from the car was not logical. Mark was tall and weighed about 30 kilograms more than her, and his autopsy showed no signs of him being dragged over rocks, but a series of drops of blood told another story. Yes, Mark was moved. But that was at the scene of the accident, at the top of the mountain, not at the bottom. Her story was untruthful. Not only did she lie about the circumstances of Mark's death, but she was also likely responsible for it and did not act alone, someone helped her. The investigators looked deeper into Aurora Martin's background and discovered that she lied to Mark about her past. She told him that she had a college degree and was working as an actress. The truth was that she did not have a good education and worked as a prostitute. She had unfortunately severed ties with her family, all except her sister. Instead, she came from a broken home and was raised by her grandparents, because her mother was extremely violent. When she was a teenager, she lived with her abusive father, so she decided to leave home at the age of 16. One of her friends told police that she was looking for a rich husband so she could have a comfortable life. The strongest evidence to convince investigators that Mark's death was likely a homicide were the life insurance policies Mark had taken out in the final months leading up to his death. His wife, Aurora Martin, was the sole beneficiary. One of the clauses of the insurance policy caught the attention of investigators: if Mark died in an accident, the value of the compensation would double. The signature on this paragraph also did not match Mark's signature. It was most likely forged by Aurora Martin. The interrogation of one of Aurora's friends revealed that there was another man in her life, and Aurora's stepmother confirmed this story. The stepmother was a vital witness in providing the police with the name of Aurora's lover. His name was Peter Schmidt. Schmidt was a German citizen from the town of Trusdor near Bonn, and had been living in Belgium. He worked as a driver at a NATO military base near the city of Mons. The police were able to prove that the two met in 1991 when they took sports lessons. This was long before Aurora met Mark van Beers. Peter was financially well off. In fact, he didn't seem to work at all, yet he always had money and Aurora was fascinated by him. Regarding the life of Peter Schmidt, he met his wife in 1992, foreign language student Ursula Deschamps, in a nightclub. He was a handsome young man who always wore his military uniform proudly and looked flawless. Ursula's family loved him. Peter was always smiling, on the go, and loved sports. They were inseparable, so much so that 4 months later, they were married. The bride and groom were both 22 years old at the time. But once the marriage papers were signed and the excitement faded, things changed. Peter became arrogant and controlling, was rarely home, and sometimes had violent outbursts, yelling at Ursula about anything and everything. Her sister witnessed one of these quarrels so much that she feared for Ursula's safety. Ursula discovered a lot of money hidden in Peter's wardrobe. Along with the money was a fake passport, and Peter could not explain why he had it in his possession. Instead, he turned it around and blamed her for searching his personal items. Ursula no longer trusted him after discovering that her husband, the new one, is involved in a scam. She realized that the sooner she divorced her husband, the better. She told her family that her intention was to file for divorce. Ursula received a summons from the police requesting permission to question her about her husband regarding his involvement in a fraud. Ursula agreed to give her statement, but before she had a chance to speak to the police, she died. This happened when Peter insisted on meeting Ursula one last time to finalize the divorce. They went to his house, then left again around 9:15 p.m. According to Schmidt, they headed to a road next to a river where a tragic accident occurred, at 10 p.m. on Saturday, August 29. 1992, Peter Schmidt's car fell into a canal outside the river. Peter miraculously escaped through the back window. Once the car disappeared underwater, Peter couldn't find Ursula anywhere, and he realized it was too late, so he swam to shore to save his life. Police found the car the next day, at the bottom of the canal, lying on its roof. There was no sign of Ursula. Her sister was convinced that Ursula had survived and was hiding because she was afraid of Peter. She was an excellent swimmer and could have made her way to safety, or perhaps the police took her into protective custody. Sadly, this was not the case, and Ursula's body was found in the canal, 800 meters from the car wreck, for days after the accident. Her cause of death was drowning. Peter Schmidt has different accounts of the accident. In one of them, he said he saw her head above the water for a moment and then disappeared. In another statement, he said he tried to unbuckle her seat belt but tripped. In a reenactment of the accident, investigators asked Peter to explain to them how he got in and out. Through the back window of his car, he tried several times but failed and could not explain why he was unable to do it while he was able to do it during the accident. When the police learned that Ursula had a life insurance policy, they knew that Peter had something to do with her death because he was the sole beneficiary of it. The police also did not believe his story about escaping from the sinking car and swimming to safety. When they arrived at the scene, his clothes were not wet. He also did not show any signs of shock or sadness over the loss of his wife. Peter Schmidt was charged with Ursula's murder. He was tried and found guilty of manslaughter, that Ursula had died due to his negligence, and that it was an accident. In the end, he only received a 3-month suspended prison sentence and a fine, which he never paid. Although he was charged with the murder of his wife, Schmidt was still able to claim on life insurance and received a payout of $500,000. Then, 3 years later, a man named Mark van Beers died in very similar circumstances. In both cases, the driver lost control of the car and it ended up in the water. The passenger was able to escape with minor injuries, and the 2 victims were not found inside the car. More importantly, that is, they were both newly married and had life insurance policies for their spouses. Investigators assumed that Peter Schmidt seduced Aurora Martin, convincing her to repeat the same fraud he committed with Ursula. They firmly believed that he was the one who orchestrated the entire scam. With all this evidence, it was confirmed that Peter and Aurora were involved in the murder of Mark van Beers. The police headed to Aurora Martin to arrest her, but they were delayed because she was no longer in Belgium. With their suspicion that Peter Schmidt was her accomplice, they went looking for him as well, but they did not find him. Effect. The Belgian authorities alerted Interpol, and an international warrant was issued for their arrest. Meanwhile, the lovers lived in Miami, Florida. They took out $500,000 from Ursula's life insurance, plus $1.3 million from Mark's life insurance and the sale of his house to fund their lavish lifestyle. The satanic pair lived in a luxurious high-rise building on Collins Avenue, Miami, United States, and ate in the most luxurious restaurants and held parties on yachts. Peter Schmidt worked as a salesman of luxury cars and yachts. Aurora Martin made sure they mixed with the right people from Miami's upscale social classes, perhaps scouting out new potential victims. They never used any credit cards and used large amounts of cash to pay rent and purchase groceries, so it was very difficult to track them down. When Brussels prosecutor Damien Vandermeersch learned of their whereabouts, the United States Marshals received an urgent request to track them down, which they did, but again, they were gone. There was no trace of their cars and the yachts were nowhere to be found. What frightened them was an article in a French newspaper about the Belgian police searching for them. They decided to disappear and escape. They fled to the Bahamas, where they remained for 2 months before returning to the United States. Returning to Miami, they sold all their belongings because they were running out of money. Miami police were able to track down their yacht, but there was no sign of Peter Schmidt or Aurora Martin. They sold the yacht. The new owner said that he bought it from them at a very good price, and said that he still owed them some money. Schmidt called him and threatened to kill him if he did not pay. They looked at the new owner's phone records and saw that Peter's calls were all made using pay phones. They monitored the phones used to call the man and, after a short chase, caught Peter before he could get into his car and took him away. At the time of his arrest, he was in possession of $50,000 in cash. They were able to reach Aurora and she did not resist arrest. In fact, she broke down in tears and told them how relieved she was. She claimed that Peter Schmidt was the mastermind behind Mark's murder and that she felt trapped in her relationship with him. Like Peter, she also had about $50,000 at the time of her arrest. That was in November 1997, and the international manhunt finally ended after 2 full years. When the American investigators interrogated her, Aurora cried and said that she did not remember the details of the Mark incident. The investigators saw that she did not respond because she was not sure what Peter was saying during his interrogation. In the end, Aurora chose to exercise her right to remain silent. They remained in U.S. custody, trying by all means possible to avoid extradition. The complication was that U.S. authorities were reluctant to extradite the couple to Belgium for a crime committed in Corsica, under French law. After a year of legal acrobatics, 18-year-old Aurora Martin was extradited. 28-year-old Peter Schmidt, 27, returned to Belgium in 1998, accompanied by Belgian officials. One of Peter's friends came forward and made a statement saying that Peter had confessed to him about killing Ursula. According to the friend, Peter told him that the car had entered the water, so Ursula instinctively headed towards Peter so they could swim together, because she was a qualified lifeguard. When she reached him, he submerged her head under the water until she lost consciousness. He left her in the water and swam away, before going out to the road to call for help. Unfortunately, according to Belgian law, a person cannot be tried for the same crime twice. Peter had already been tried for Ursula's murder and received a very light sentence. The trial began in September 2001, and the demon lovers arrived together, holding hands. They both pleaded not guilty. The prosecution said that although Peter Schmidt was the mastermind of the murder plot, Aurora Martin was his accomplice when she heard how Schmidt made his fortune, and targeted Mark not with the intention of marrying and starting a family but to defraud him out of life insurance. Schmidt may have planned it all, but she was involved in her marriage to Mark, knowing exactly how it would end. From witness testimonies, the police were able to deduce what actually happened in Corsica on the night of Mark's murder. While they were on a scenic drive, Aurora asked Mark to stop the car, because she was not feeling well. She went out to vomit and he went out to take care of her. This is when a second car stopped, in which 3 German friends of Peter launched an attack with baseball bats. As soon as Mark lost consciousness, they returned him to the car and pushed it over the cliff. The prosecution claimed that Schmidt was in Corsica at the same time as Aurora and Mark and that he was there with 3 German friends. However, they could not find any documents that conclusively prove that he was in Corsica at that time, but let us consider that it was before Ursula's death. Peter's wife discovered false documents and IDs with Peter's picture on them and told her sister about it. It was very likely that he traveled to Corsica using a false identity. Also, when the police interrogated him, Peter could not remember where he was in May 1995, so he had no alibi that could exonerate him. Peter Schmidt defended himself and claimed that he and Aurora Martin broke up in 1994 before Mark came into the picture and that they only rekindled their relationship after his death. After our separation in 1994, Aurora resumed contacting me in mid-1995 because she had received a large sum of money that she did not know how to manage. I advised her to put it in Luxembourg, and she followed my advice. She decided to ask me because she thought I was an honest man. The courtroom erupted in mocking laughter, but what investigators were able to prove was that Schmidt had been in the south of France 6 months before Mark Van Beer's accident and had sent postcards to his family in Germany, one from Bonifacio in Corsica, most likely on a reconnaissance mission, to find on the best place for the incident to occur. Keep in mind that this was before Mark and Aurora were married. The 3 German people involved in the crime have never been found, and since there are so many manipulations, lies and half-truths in the case, one can only wonder if Peter's German friends really exist. Aurora's lie, which the psychiatrist described as fictional, so why is the story of the 3 attackers true? Would it have been possible for one person to hit Mark Van Beers with a bat, put him back in the car, push the car over the cliff, climb the cliff, take Mark's body from the car and carry him to the water's edge. Peter Schmidt was a strong man with rock climbing experience. Mark did not see his attacker coming, and had no chance to defend himself. There may have been no other accomplices. Chances are that only two people were present on that fateful night in Corsia, Peter Schmidt and Aurora Martin. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning two guilty verdicts. Aurora Martin was sentenced to 15 years in prison for her role in her husband's murder, and Peter Schmidt, as the mastermind of the killing, received 20 years. Aurora was released in 2007 after serving only 6 years in prison, and these days she lives in the Netherlands, where she works as a French language teacher. Peter Schmidt was released 1 year later, after serving only 7 years of his 20-year sentence in prison. He was returned to his homeland, Germany, where he found work as a carpenter. The condition of their release was that they were not allowed any contact with each other. The most disturbing thought about this case is that they could have gotten away with it. In fact, they almost did. If Aurora had been able to keep her story straight and give only one version of the circumstances surrounding the accident, and if she had waited longer before severing ties with Mark's family, they would not have suspected her of committing the crime. If she had waited before cashing out the life insurance policies, but she did not. Are doing. If she could have been more careful as her lover, this could have been a perfect crime.